Thank you for all those varied answers. Now, for our third question. What is it that you do in the body? What is your function?
My main function is that I transport gases. Oxygen enters red blood cells when red blood cells pass through the lungs, and then red blood cells transport this oxygen throughout the body to the tissues. The tissues then give the red blood cells their carbon dioxide. Red blood cells can help transport carbon dioxide in a couple of ways, but when the red blood cells get to the lungs, this carbon dioxide then is allowed to pass into the air sacs, and then it can be passed out through the nose. And so we primarily function as gas transport, oxygen from the lungs to the tissues, and carbon dioxide from the tissues to the lungs.
What do I do? I perform phagocytosis primarily, mostly of bacteria, although I'm also partial to things that have antibodies stuck to them. I'm the first one typically to get to the site of an infection, and so I'm really important not only in performing phagocytosis, but of releasing granules which help fight microbes and start inflammatory responses. It's even been shown recently that I can release some DNA to form a net which helps to trap microbes and prevent them from moving. So I'm very important in what are known as your innate immune responses, the ones that you're born with. What do? I release my granules, and they are quite toxic, believe me. These chemicals which they contain, such as reactive forms of oxygen and nitrogen, they can be used to combat a variety of microorganisms and even larger parasites such as worms. And so, in response to an infection by worms, I may release my granules in their vicinity, making their life unpleasant. These granules also contain compounds which fight viruses, and which signal other white blood cells, and which will promote the reorganization or the remodeling of the surrounding tissue. So these granules have a number of functions in the immune system. What do? I promote inflammation. These granules are full of signals, such as histamine, which will cause vasodilation and bring more blood to a wounded area, and other signals which will attract white blood cells to an infected area. And I, along with my cousin the mast cells, can bind a specific kind of antibody known as IgE that we make in response to things we are allergic to. So, when you are allergic to something and find it in the environment, it signals me to release inflammatory signals. Monocytes have 3 things they do. 1. They perform phagocytosis, and they ingest a lot of microbes. 2. They can release local hormones, which have roles in stimulating other white blood cells during immune reactions. And 3. They do something a little complicated where, after they eat a microbe, they can rip it apart and wear some of it on their cell membrane and thus present it to other white blood cells such as lymphocytes. Monocytes and their derivatives are very important antigen-presenting cells, and this helps to stimulate the lymphocytes into action. I tend to specialize in larger cells, sometimes even body cells, but I can perform phagocytosis of fungi or virally infected cells. Lymphocytes are incredibly complicated. You might say that only the brain cells are more complicated than we are. We do many things, although there are different classes of lymphocytes. Some release antibodies. Some look for cancer cells or cells which are infected with virus because they can distinguish between self and non-self. The reactions involving lymphocytes can be incredibly complex with lots of interacting components.
I do a lot of things. I'm best known for promoting the clotting of blood after an injury. But I can also limit blood flow to an area by promoting the constriction of the muscles and blood vessel walls. I can help an injured area heal itself. I can form a platelet plug in addition to starting this clot.